First contact at Fort Victory. The massive Zentarian diplomatic vessel descended through Earth's atmosphere, its crystalline hull refracting sunlight in rainbow patterns across the clouds. Inside, Ambassador Kixtal adjusted his environmental suit's settings one final time. After 3 solar cycles of preparation, the Zentarian Confederation had finally agreed to assess Earth's military capabilities, a necessary step before considering humans for membership in their galactic alliance. Kixtal's 4 eyes blinked in sequence as he reviewed the preliminary data. Humans were, by all measures, a primitive species. Their spacecraft barely reached their own moon. Their weapons still relied on chemical propellants, and their soldiers trained in actual physical combat rather than neural simulations. It should have been a routine inspection, yet something about the reports troubled him. "Ambassador, we've arrived at the designated coordinates," his aide, Dr. Venra, announced. She was the Confederation's leading xenobiologist, chosen specifically for this mission. The humans call this Fort Victory. The landing pad came into view, a simple concrete structure surrounded by various training facilities. No quantum stabilizers, no gravity wells, not even basic shield generators, just raw materials and determination. Kixtal felt a mixture of pity and curiosity. General Sarah Chen waited at the landing zone, her dress uniform immaculate, despite the summer heat. Behind her stood a formation of officers, each standing perfectly still despite the dust kicked up by the alien vessel's landing thrusters. "Ambassador Kixtal," Chen called out as the alien delegation descended their ship's ramp. "Welcome to Earth's Advanced Combat Training Center. We're honored to demonstrate humanity's military capabilities." Kixtal's translator processed her words, noting the pride in her tone. "General Chen, we appreciate your world's transparency in this evaluation. Though I must admit, our preliminary scans show rather basic facilities." Chen's smile never wavered. "Sometimes, Ambassador, the simplest tools forge the strongest warriors. Would you like to begin the tour?" Their first stop was the basic training grounds. Kixtal watched in growing disbelief as human recruits ran obstacle courses in full combat gear, carried heavy loads through muddy terrain, and engaged in hand-to-hand combat training. The physical strain they endured seemed unnecessarily brutal. "General," Kixtal interrupted, "surely these exercises could be simulated. Why risk injury to valuable military assets?" Chen's response was immediate. "Pain is the best teacher, Ambassador. Our soldiers don't just learn combat, they live it. Every bruise, every exhausted muscle, every moment of pushing past their limits makes them stronger." Dr. Venra's instruments whirred as she scanned the training humans. Fascinating. Their cortisol levels are elevated, yet their performance improves. They're actually becoming more efficient under stress. The delegation moved to the firing range, where recruits practiced with what Kixtal considered antique weaponry, projectile weapons, explosive devices, even primitive bladed implements. Yet the speed and precision of the human movements gave him pause. "Notice how they adapt," Chen explained, pointing to a group practicing urban combat. "Each soldier learns to think independently while maintaining unit cohesion. They're not just following protocols, they're developing instincts." Kixtal's upper eyes narrowed as he watched a training squad clear a building. Their movements were fluid, almost predatory. They'd move like hunting packs, he observed, a note of unease in his voice. "Exactly," Chen confirmed. "Humans are persistence predators by nature. We've simply refined those instincts for modern warfare." As the day progressed, Kixtal's reports to the Confederation became increasingly urgent. The humans weren't just training soldiers, they were systematically pushing the boundaries of their species' capabilities. Every primitive method had a purpose, every seemingly brutal exercise was carefully designed to enhance natural abilities. During the evening meal, Kixtal watched the recruits interact in their dining facility. Despite the day's harsh training, they were animated, joking, forming bonds that his species would consider unnecessarily emotional for military units. They're not just soldiers, Dr. Venra noted quietly. They're becoming something more. General Chen overheard the comment. That's exactly right, Doctor. We don't just train their bodies or their minds. We forge their spirits. Every human who completes this program discovers they're capable of far more than they imagined. Kixtall stared at his untouched meal, his 4 eyes focused on the datapad containing his preliminary report. The words seemed inadequate to convey what he was witnessing. How could he explain to the Confederation that these primitive methods were creating something that defied their advanced understanding of military science? As night fell over Fort Victory, the sounds of training continued. Somewhere in the darkness, humans were pushing themselves beyond normal limits, willingly embracing pain and hardship in pursuit of transformation. General, Kixtall finally spoke. I believe we may have significantly underestimated your species' potential. Chen's smile returned, but this time there was something else in it, something that made the ambassador's scales ripple with unease. That's a common mistake, Ambassador, one that rarely happens twice. The first day of inspection was complete, but Kixtall already knew this mission would change everything. Humanity wasn't just developing soldiers, they were evolving warriors, and as he watched the training continue under the stars, he wondered if his people were prepared for what that might mean. The breaking point. Dawn broke over Fort Victory with the sound of thunder, not from the weather, but from the synchronized footfalls of 5,000 recruits running in formation. Ambassador Kixtall stood at the observation tower, all 4 eyes fixed on the display of coordinated movement below. They've been running for 3 hours, Dr. Venra reported, her instruments humming. Cardiovascular readings suggest they're nowhere near their physical limits. This shouldn't be possible for their species' baseline capabilities. General Chen appeared behind them, her presence announced only by the slight creak of the tower's metal floor. Ready to see what happens when we actually start pushing them. The morning's demonstrations left the alien delegation in stunned silence. They watched as recruits were subjected to what the humans casually called stress testing, simulated combat scenarios combining physical exhaustion, psychological pressure, and tactical challenges. In one arena, soldiers fought through tear gas while solving complex mathematical equations. Another group performed delicate explosive ordnance disposal while under simulated sniper fire. The most disturbing display involved recruits completing underwater obstacle courses while their oxygen supplies were deliberately limited. This is barbaric, Kixtall finally protested, watching a group of humans emerge from the water training facility, gasping but immediately ready for their next challenge. You're torturing your own people. General Chen's expression remained neutral. Ambassador, do you know what happens to most species under extreme stress? They break. Do you know what happens to humans? She gestured to the training grounds. They adapt. They grow stronger. Every limitation we think we have is just a barrier waiting to be broken. Dr. Venra's instruments suddenly began emitting urgent signals. Ambassador, you need to see these readings. The human soldiers. Their cellular structure is actually changing. Their bodies are literally rebuilding themselves to become more efficient under stress. The afternoon brought them to what the humans called the pit, a massive underground facility where recruits faced their most primal fears. Kixtall watched in horror as soldiers were subjected to complete sensory deprivation, followed by overwhelming sensory input, their minds tested to breaking points that would shatter most species' sanity. Stop this, Kixtall demanded as one recruit emerged from a particularly intense session, shaking but somehow smiling. You're destroying them. No, the recruit spoke up, surprising the ambassador. They're helping us find ourselves. Every time we face these challenges, we discover something new about our capabilities. The soldier's eyes held a fierce light that made Kixtall step back involuntarily. General Chen led them to the Psychological Warfare Division next. Here, recruits weren't just learning to resist interrogation. They were developing what the humans called mental resilience. Kixtall observed as soldiers underwent simulated scenarios that would break most species' minds, emerging stronger and more determined. Your species treats trauma as something to be avoided, Chen explained, watching another successful training session. We've learned to use it as a forge. Every challenge, every fear faced, every limit pushed. It's all part of the transformation. As night approached, Dr. Venra pulled Kikstal aside, her voice trembling. Ambassador, I've completed my preliminary analysis. These humans, they're not just training soldiers. They're systematically reprogramming their own species' evolution. Each generation of recruits shows marked improvements over the last. They're directing their own adaptation. Kikstal felt a cold dread settle in his secondary stomach. How is this possible without genetic manipulation? That's what terrifies me, Venra whispered. They're doing it through sheer will and determination. No genetic engineering, no neural implants, no quantum consciousness transfers. They're achieving through brutal, primitive methods what our civilization needed thousands of years of technological advancement to accomplish. The day's final demonstration involved what humans called breaking point training. Recruits were pushed until they physically couldn't continue, and then pushed further. Kikstal watched in fascination and horror as human after human refused to quit, their bodies failing while their will remained unbroken. I don't understand, he finally admitted to General Chen. Why do they continue when they have nothing left to give? Chen's answer chilled him to his core. Because they've learned that nothing left is just another limitation to overcome. Watch what happens next. As if on cue, the exhausted recruits began to rise, supporting each other, moving with a determination that defied their physical state. They weren't just soldiers following orders. They were becoming something else entirely. That night, Kikstal sent an encrypted message to the Confederation. Urgent review required. Human military development exceeds all projected models. They are not creating soldiers. They are forging something unprecedented. A force that views impossibility as a challenge rather than a limitation. As he watched the lights of Fort Victory's night training operations, Kikstal realized with growing unease that he was witnessing something unprecedented in galactic history. A species that had learned to weaponize its own evolution through sheer force of will. And this was only their second day of observation. Beyond physical limits. The third day at Fort Victory began with an incident that would haunt Ambassador Kikstal's dreams for cycles to come. During what humans called routine morning exercises, a training accident sent 3 tons of reinforced concrete crashing down onto a squad of recruits. Before the alien delegation could even process their horror, something unprecedented happened. The humans didn't break. They didn't die. They lifted the concrete, together. Impossible, Dr. Venra whispered, her instruments frantically recording data. Their muscle density can't support this kind of load. Their bones should be shattering. Their nervous systems are adapting. General Chen interrupted calmly. What you're witnessing is a phenomenon we call crisis evolution. Under extreme stress, humans can temporarily exceed their normal physical limitations. Kikstal watched as the recruits not only survived, but immediately resumed their training, their bodies showing signs of rapid recovery that defied conventional biology. This isn't natural, he stated. Chen's smile was unsettling. Define natural, Ambassador. Is it natural for a species to accept its limitations, or is it natural to push beyond them? The morning's revelations continued as the delegation was led to a sealed facility deep within the base. Here, in climate-controlled chambers, recruits were being exposed to environmental extremes that should have been fatal. Some trained in near-vacuum conditions, others in crushing pressures. Temperature chambers ranged from Arctic cold to desert heat. Your species can't possibly survive these conditions, Kikstal protested, watching a group of soldiers practicing combat maneuvers in what appeared to be toxic atmosphere. Couldn't, Chen corrected. Past tense. Turns out human adaptation isn't limited by what we think is possible. It's only limited by what we're willing to endure to evolve. Dr. Venra's scientific curiosity finally overcame her horror. But how? Without genetic manipulation or cybernetic enhancement. We discovered something interesting about human DNA, Chen explained, leading them to a research section. It's not just a code. It's more like suggestions. Under enough pressure, with enough will, we can convince our bodies to interpret those suggestions differently. The afternoon brought them to what the humans called the Apex Labs. Here, recruits underwent what they termed cognitive expansion. Kikstal observed in growing unease as soldiers demonstrated abilities that bordered on the impossible: accelerated learning, extreme sensory awareness, and what could only be described as tactical precognition. They're not just stronger, Dr. Venera reported, her voice trembling. Their neural plasticity is off the charts. They're literally rewiring their brains through sheer force of will. One demonstration involved a recruit who had been studying an alien language for less than a week. He was now speaking it fluently, with perfect accent and cultural nuances. Another soldier demonstrated the ability to process multiple streams of combat information simultaneously, coordinating complex battlefield scenarios with computer-like precision. How many of your people can achieve these abilities? Kikstal asked, dreading the answer. All of them, Chen replied simply. Given enough motivation and the right circumstances, every human has this potential. We're just learning how to unlock it systematically. The most disturbing revelation came during the evening demonstrations. A group of advanced trainees showcased what they called group consciousness enhancement, an ability to operate as a perfect unit without any visible communication. It's not telepathy, Chen explained, noting the ambassador's shock. It's more like shared intuition. Humans are pack hunters by nature. We're just taking that natural tendency to its logical extreme. Dr. Venera pulled Kikstal aside during a brief break, her professional composure finally cracking. Ambassador, these humans, they're not just adapting. They're actively evolving, in real time, in response to challenges. Every limitation we thought they had, they're treating them like suggestions rather than rules. The day's final demonstration involved what the humans cryptically called threshold breaking. Kikstal watched as soldiers performed feats that his species had deemed mathematically impossible, processing information faster than their neural pathways should allow, moving with speed that violated known physical limitations, demonstrating strength that their muscle density couldn't possibly support. We had it wrong, Dr. Venera concluded, reviewing her data. We thought we were observing a primitive species learning to use advanced military techniques. Instead, we're watching them transcend their own species' limitations. Kikstal finished, his scales paling. Not through technology or artificial enhancement, but through sheer determination. That evening, as the alien delegation prepared their daily reports, they witnessed one final chilling scene. A group of graduating recruits was gathering for their final test. Their eyes held a look that Kikstal had never seen in any species, not just confidence or determination, but something else, something that spoke of humanity's unique ability to face the impossible and simply decide to overcome it. General, Kikstal asked, his voice barely a whisper, what exactly are you creating here? Chen's response would be featured prominently in his report to the Confederation. We're not creating anything, Ambassador. We're just helping humans become what they were always meant to be. The real question is the galaxy ready for that? As night fell over Fort Victory, the sounds of training continued, but they seemed different now. Each thud, each shout, each moment of human endeavor carried new meaning. This wasn't just military training. This was evolution in action, driven by will rather than time, shaped by determination rather than chance. And somewhere in the darkness, humans continued to push beyond what any species had thought possible, rewriting the rules of their own existence one impossible achievement at a time. The demonstration. The fourth day at Fort Victory began with an announcement that made Ambassador Kikstal's scales ripple with apprehension. General Chen had arranged for a full combat demonstration, not a simulation or training exercise, but a genuine display of what their graduates could achieve. Today, Chen announced, leading them to a massive underground facility, you'll witness what we call Operation Threshold. It's time to show you what humans are truly capable of when we stop holding back. The facility was unlike anything they'd seen before. A vast chamber stretching kilometers in each direction, filled with various terrain types and environmental hazards. Dr. Venra's instruments immediately began registering anomalous readings. The gravity in different sectors, she reported, her voice tight with disbelief. It's varying from 0.1 to 15 times Earth normal. The atmospheric conditions, temperature extremes, radiation levels, no species could survive these combinations. Chen's response was characteristically calm. Watch. The first team of graduates entered the chamber wearing what appeared to be criminally inadequate protective gear. Kixtall expected them to collapse instantly in the harsh conditions. Instead, they moved with fluid grace, their bodies adapting in real time to each environmental challenge. Impossible, Dr. Venra whispered, her instruments whirring frantically. Their cellular structure is actively reconfiguring. They're not just enduring these conditions, they're optimizing for them. The demonstration escalated. Teams of graduates navigated terrain that shifted unpredictably, fought through atmospheric conditions that should have been lethal, and coordinated complex tactical maneuvers, while their bodies were subjected to forces that should have rendered conscious thought impossible. Look at their eyes, Kixtall observed, his voice trembling. The graduates' expressions showed no fear, no hesitation, only an intense focus that seemed to bend reality around them. Then came the combat trials. The facility released what appeared to be autonomous combat drones, advanced models that even the Confederation's elite forces struggled to defeat. The humans didn't just fight them. They demolished them, moving with impossible speed and precision. Their reaction times, Dr. Venra reported, checking her readings for the third time. They're exceeding the physical limitations of human neurology. This shouldn't be possible without synthetic enhancement. Chen smiled. We found that human limitations were largely self-imposed. Remove those mental barriers, and interesting things happen. The next phase of the demonstration targeted what the Confederation had always considered humanity's greatest weakness, their emotional nature. The facility began generating psychic interference patterns designed to induce fear, confusion, and panic. Instead of breaking, the humans seemed to grow stronger. Their coordination improved. Their efficiency increased. They weren't just resisting the psychological warfare. They were using it as fuel. Extraordinary, Dr. Venra breathed. They're converting psychological stress into physical enhancement. Their bodies are producing entirely new combinations of neurotransmitters. They're evolving in response to the threat. The final phase of the demonstration was what broke Kixtall's professional composure. The facility initiated what Chen called total environmental denial, conditions that should have made survival, let alone combat, absolutely impossible. The humans didn't just survive. They thrived. Teams moved through absolute darkness with perfect coordination. They fought in vacuum conditions without protective gear, their bodies somehow adapting to process minimal oxygen. They communicated without speaking, moved without seeing, fought without hesitation. Stop, Kixtall finally ordered, his voice cracking. This is enough. We've seen. No, Chen interrupted gently. You haven't. Not yet. She pressed a button, and the facility's central chamber opened to reveal what appeared to be a portal of some kind. What is this? Dr. Venra demanded, her instruments suddenly registering readings that defied analysis. We call it the Void Chamber, Chen explained. It generates conditions that exist nowhere in normal spacetime. Want to see what humans do when faced with physical laws that don't match our universe? Before either alien could protest, a team of graduates entered the chamber. What happened next defied description. The humans moved through impossible space, their bodies and minds adapting to physics that shouldn't have allowed for conscious existence. How? Kixtall whispered, all four eyes fixed on the impossible scene before him. How are they even alive? Chen's response was simple but terrifying. Because they decided to be. We found that human will, properly focused, can overcome almost any physical limitation, including, apparently, the ones we thought were universal constants. As the demonstration concluded, the graduates emerged from the void chamber looking not exhausted or traumatized, but energized. Their eyes held something that made Kickstall's ancient species' survival instincts scream in warning, a look that suggested these humans had stared into the impossible and found it wanting. That evening, as the alien delegation prepared their most urgent report yet to the Confederation, Dr. Venera made a discovery that would change everything. "Ambassador," she called, her voice shaking. "I've been analyzing the data from all 4 days. These demonstrations, these achievements, they're not the end result." "What do you mean?" "According to these readings, these humans, as incredible as they seem, they're just the beginning. They're still evolving, still adapting, still pushing further." Kickstall stared out at Fort Victory's nighttime training grounds, where more recruits were even now pushing beyond what his species had thought possible. "What are they becoming?" he wondered aloud. Chen's voice answered from the shadows, making both aliens jump. "That's the fascinating thing about human potential, Ambassador. We don't know. And that's exactly how we like it." The report. In the secure communication chamber aboard their vessel, Ambassador Kickstall faced the holographic displays of the Zentarian High Command. His scales had lost their usual luster, and all 4 eyes showed signs of stress no regeneration cycle could erase. "Honored Council," he began, his voice carrying the weight of 5 days' worth of revelations, "I must begin by admitting that every preliminary assessment of human military capability was catastrophically wrong." The council members stirred uneasily as Kickstall interfaced his data crystals with the ship's systems. The chamber filled with holographic recordings from Fort Victory, each more disturbing than the last. "What you're seeing isn't enhanced or manipulated," Dr. Venera added, her professional detachment cracking. "These humans aren't just training soldiers. They're systematically redesigning the boundaries of their own species." The recording showed graduates performing feats that violated what the Zentarians had considered universal constants. Humans adapting to supposedly lethal environments, overcoming physical limitations, demonstrating abilities that should have required millions of years of evolution to achieve. "Most concerning," Kickstall continued, "is that Fort Victory isn't unique. According to our final briefing, this is just one of hundreds of similar facilities across their planet, each focusing on different aspects of human potential, each pushing different boundaries." The High Command watched in silence as the ambassador played his final recording, the void chamber demonstration. Even through holographic transmission, the sight of humans moving through impossible space made the ancient council members recoil. "The humans have a saying," Kickstall reported, his voice tight with controlled fear. "Necessity is the mother of invention. But they've taken this concept to an extreme we never imagined possible. They don't view physical laws as absolute. They see them as suggestions." Dr. Venera's scientific analysis followed, each data point more alarming than the last. Their rate of adaptation is accelerating. Each generation of graduates shows capabilities beyond their predecessors. They're not just evolving. They're directing their own evolution through sheer force of will. The Council's chief strategist finally spoke. Surely they must understand the danger they pose to themselves. This level of development without proper controls. "That's what we thought at first," Kickstall interrupted. "But on our final day, we discovered something even more disturbing." He hesitated, then played the last recording. The hologram showed General Chen in her office, speaking candidly after their final inspection. Her words would haunt the Zentarian civilization for generations to come. "You think we're pushing ourselves too hard, too fast," she said, looking directly at Kickstall. "You think we're taking unnecessary risks with our own evolution. But you're missing the point. We're not doing this because we have to. We're doing this because we can. Because every time someone tells us something's impossible, we take it as a challenge." The recording continued. You're worried about what we're becoming. The real question is, what aren't we capable of becoming? Every limitation you've seen us break, those were just the ones we let you see. The council chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. Finally, the High Commander spoke. Your recommendation, Ambassador. Kixtel's response was immediate. Full diplomatic recognition. Immediate alliance. Not because they need it. They clearly don't. But because we need to be close enough to understand what they're becoming. And if we refuse, Dr. Venera answered this time, then we risk becoming obsolete. These humans, they're not just advancing. They're redefining what advancement means. They're not following any evolutionary path we understand. They're creating their own. The final recording played. A graduating class at Fort Victory, their eyes holding that impossible light that spoke of humanity's unique relationship with the concept of limitations. They weren't just soldiers. They weren't just evolved humans. They were something new. A species that had learned to use determination itself as a force of nature. There's one last thing, Kixtel added, his scales rippling with remembered unease. On our final day, I asked General Chen what humanity's ultimate goal was. Her answer. He paused, gathering himself. She said, to find out what's possible. Not what's possible for humans, but what's possible, period. And then to go beyond that. The council chamber erupted in concerned murmurs, but Kixtel wasn't finished. And then she said something worse. She said, everything you've seen here, this is just the beginning. We're not trying to become the strongest species in the galaxy. We're trying to become something the galaxy has never seen before. As the council debated their response, Kixtel stared at the final image from Fort Victory, a simple plaque on the wall of the graduation hall. It read, the only true limitation is the one you accept. Somewhere on Earth, in hundreds of facilities like Fort Victory, humans continued their relentless push beyond what any species had thought possible. They weren't just training soldiers or evolving their species. They were answering a question no other civilization had dared to ask. What happens when a species decides that impossible is just another word for not trying hard enough? The answer, as the Zentarian Confederation was beginning to understand, would reshape the galaxy in ways no one could predict. And humanity, with that unique light in their eyes that spoke of limitless potential, was just getting started.